Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. I have to say it is the strangest and best introduction I've ever received. Um, can you hear me okay? No? All right. This whole event is strange for a variety of reasons. Mostly, I think, because, as Dan said, the last time I was in Miami, last time I saw Dan, I was 13 years old, and if anybody had told me that I would one day stand here and read from a novel about mental illness, domestic violence, and the relationships between fathers and sons and mothers and sons and many relationships in between, I would not probably have believed that. So it's very, very, very strange to be here. I remember from that trip that I met Mr. Bowden and that my camera was stolen from the car that we had rented. And that's really about all. So I will read, I was warned that the introduction might go longer than usual. So I've decided to read very, very, very briefly from this novel, and I'll introduce it only to say that it's the story of a man who, in his early 20s, begins suffering the symptoms of bipolar disorder, and that experience coincides with the time in his life when his mother goes to prison for murdering a man in defense of his wife, who he's beating in a parking lot. Not particularly cheery subject, I know. So I will read the very, very first chapter of the book, which Dan referenced, and it's very, very short, and it should give you a sense of the beginning of the book. In the summer of 1991, my mother beat a man to death with a 22-ounce Estwing framing hammer, and I fell in love with Tess Wolfe. Now, many years later, they have both disappeared, and I am alone here on this pretty clearing in the woods, alone save for the tar and the bird and the other thing for which I have no name. That is the opening of the novel. Joey March, Joseph March, Joe March, the narrator, the protagonist of this book, is telling the story from many years on and looking back at this time in his life, this moment of his youth, which is both painful and wonderful. Painful for the disorder, painful for the depressive aspects of that disorder, painful for the sort of disintegration of his family, but also there's a kind of a wonder and a pleasure in it because he fell wildly in love with this woman, Tess Wolfe, who has since left him. So I'll read a short section here where he is describing the moment when he meets Tess, and also the first moment of mania, and those two things coincide here. The next evening, I drove into Cannon Beach in the rain. And because it was raining, or because I was tired of camping, or because it was getting dark, I paid for a room at a motel. It was too much money, $35 a night or whatever it was, but worth it for the shower, the neatly wrapped soap, the cup sealed in plastic, and the fresh towels and the clean sheets. Then, naked beneath the spray of hot water, an abrupt and inexplicable detonation, a switch thrown. I was overcome by pleasure, by a sense of overwhelming power, rapid rise, sudden swelling euphoria, savage ecstasy. My heart huge. I was absent all fear. I was standing on the bed. I was dressing the clean shirt like some kind of wonder fabric, making my skin hum. And I left that room pulsing with mysterious rapture, qualities I'd never known. And outside by the Coke machines, I broke the shell and withdrew my body until there was no separation between it and myself, it and the night sky. I put my head down and flew like a fish, all my muscles fast twitch, my bones pure black oil, my blood made of gasoline. There was no cold, there was nothing I could not control. I stretched my arms and legs, arched my liquid back, and sailed. I was a traveler, a man. I had weight and fire. I found a bar and walked inside like some kind of Clint Eastwood cowboy, some fearless hero soldier on leave. I see all of it, from the hot water to the do not disturb sign, to the wet street, to the bar door. The way I began to swing upwards from happiness into something else again, and then again higher, with my eyes all clear, and my body humming, and my heart ever expanding. Something like I'd never felt in my life. No drug had ever come close. Eyes huge, I saw every detail of every surface of every object. The place was full of people, but I glided past them. I was a skier, a dancer, a skater. I ordered a drink I'd never ordered in my life. Beam rocks, I said. I don't know where it came from, whether I was conjuring some actor or some guy who used to come in to Chez J or what. I'd never much liked bourbon, but I was going to like it now. It was still coming on, that thing, whatever it was, whatever it is. And then I was the sudden scorching center of that place, the very marrow of it. I looked around and I waited, and on it flowed into my blood. And when you feel it, when you've got it in you, and your eyes are like that, and your skin is humming, and your heart is deadly, there is no memory. There is nothing but the present world, which pours in, and all you want is more of it. You want everything, and the room was full of women, and it was as if they moved together in some unified rhythm, as if it were some code, some bodily language that only I could read. My heart firing, my eyes so sharp I could kill with my vision. I had perfect control of the room. I saw every inch of it rolling into me through my eyes and skin, and I waited, and then I crossed the floor for that one woman who was something else, who was not part of the heaving mass. I wove through to her as if I were a person accustomed to crossing rooms that way, yet I know that was the first time in my life. I looked her in the eyes and said, "My name is Joey. I find you extraordinary. I'd like to buy you a drink and talk for a while if that would be all right." And when she looked at me as if I were a lunatic and her friends gaped, I said, "I'm not crazy, by the way. I'm not dangerous. It's just that I find you so graceful, and so I'd like for us to have a drink together, and would that be all right? Would that be okay?" She gave me her hand and laughed and curtsied and said, "Why, yes, sir, it would be just fine indeed," mocking me, putting on a bad Southern accent. Her friends teased her and disappeared as if I had dissolved them myself with a flick of a finger. We drank and danced and drank and danced, and I saw everything. I saw her face as whole, and I saw it disassemble. I saw her tongue move over her teeth, saw her green eyes, her throat, her lips, her small breasts, her narrow hips, her bare shoulders, her big feet. I saw her turn to water. She was everywhere, all of her falling through me, her lemon smell, her liquid skin, her soft wrists, her heat. And when I found the sweat at the back of her neck hidden beneath her hair, I trailed my tongue across it. She leaned back against me, and I said into her ear, idiot child that I was, "I might die of you." "What? What did you say?" She was turning and then looking at me as if she'd seen a thing she didn't like. And right then something splintered in my chest, behind my eyes, in the air. "What did you say?" she asked again. "I might die of you," I said. But it was no longer joyous, no longer drunken, no longer light. It was something else. I had lost the elixir. It was running out of me. I could feel it subsiding. She looked, and I thought she would leave me there. My eyes were shrinking. I was losing my sight. I was falling. All the edges were softening. But still I tried to see. Before it was too late, before it was gone, I tried to see, and then after a moment of the two of us standing still, while all those other people warped and buckled, she took my hand in her strong fingers, and she pulled us from the bar. We were changed in the air, or I was. We came to a stop out on the empty street, pulling our coats on with the door closing to dampen the music. Though I tried with real concentration, I couldn't get her face into focus. I was running out of sentences. What did you say in there? I didn't want to say it again. It felt as if it had been years ago. The whole night was fading. I couldn't remember where I was. I'd forgotten the name of my motel. She said, "What does that mean? What does that mean you could die of me?" I shrugged again. I didn't know what it meant. I was having trouble reconciling this woman in the street with the woman in the bar. Christ, I'd been alive barely 21 years. She shook her head. She seemed angry, and I was afraid that she'd leave, which I did not want. I did not want to speak, and I did not want her to leave. "You've lost all your charm," she said. "What's happened to that? Where'd it go?" "I don't know," I told her. I noticed that the noise was gone from my head, that there was now a wonderful stillness. I wished that we'd stop talking, but I knew that I'd need to speak to keep her there. I must have said something, made some noise. "Are you talking to yourself?" I looked at her. "I thought you said you weren't a madman," she said. I smiled. "But you are?" "I don't know. It's possible." Her eyes were on mine. She wouldn't look away. "Are you trying to decide if I'm going to kill you?" "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what I'm doing." I laughed. She squinted at me. "Well?" "No," she said. "No, I don't think you will." "In that case, maybe we can walk somewhere." "Where?" "I don't know. I just got here. I barely know where I am." "Come," she said, and gave me her hand. Out on the enormous beach, the sand was firm from the rain, and the sound of the waves was a constant white noise roar. It felt good to be out in the low wind with her, even if it had all run out of me and I was exhausted. "What's wrong with you?" There wasn't much light, and it was difficult to see her face. "I don't know," I said. "Why did you say you could die of me? Just a thing to say to a pretty girl in a bar, I guess." "Asshole." "Not really," I said. "And anyway, why would you come out here with me?" "I don't know." So neither of us knows anything. We went on like that, crossing the vast beach toward the waterline, and all I wanted was for her not to leave me, as if without her I might not survive the night. And the thing was that it seemed we were both trying to answer that same question about what was wrong with me. And then as we came to the ocean, gliding silent across the sand, we stopped and watched for a while. The silhouette of Haystack Rock against the sky, and the wide blue bubbling tongues of foam moving in and out of the water. "Why would you come out here with me?" "Because you were very charming for a while," she said. "Mostly, though, because you're so sad." "Am I?" "You were." "I don't know. I do." "And you like that?" "Maybe." "Well, I'm glad you're here," I told her. "I wouldn't want you to be anywhere else." Ah, there's the charm again. "No," I said, "I mean it." I looked at her dark shape. "Are you looking at me?" "Yes," I said, and reached for her. My uncanny mind was very quiet then, and all I felt was that warm body and the ocean throbbing its gentle pulse in my brain. And later, we walked back across the beach toward the lights of the little town, softened by the blue fog. She returned with me to the motel without either of us making the suggestion, and when we stepped inside, it was as if we'd entered someone else's room. Someone I might have known, whose things I recognized, but were nonetheless not my own. She undressed me and then herself, and for a moment we stood together, my chest against her warm breasts, my hands moving over her smooth back. She was lovely, but I felt no desire, no lust. I wanted only to keep her against me, as if to ward off the bird which I could sense circling. There were brief twinges of that weight, ominous contractions in my chest, but nothing that lasted. I became convinced that she was my protector. She kissed me, and then again with more passion. I picked her up and laid her on the bed. I pulled the blankets over us, and then her tight to me. "If we could lie here tonight," I said, "if we could just be still, if we could just be quiet." "You're a strange boy, Joey," she whispered. Joseph, so strange." "It's only recent," I said. She sighed and fitted herself to me with all her warmth, and I thought she was relieved to give up sex until she said, "So what, baby, you just want me to hold you?" I laughed and closed my eyes, and we lay there falling asleep, while together we battled back the bird which circled and circled above us, looking for an entry point. So that's the beginning of their, it's the beginning of their romance, and they're together really from that moment on until many, many years later, after owning businesses together, after building a house together, the house where Joey is writing from, she disappears without anything other than a note. And so I'll read just a page and a half or so of his much older self trying to work out exactly what has happened to him. I'm afraid that I have made some fundamental error. I worry that I did not look at Tess correctly, have not. Through all the years together, and then from here too, from afar, in all these increments of recollection. What is the nature of this error? I'm not certain. Is it something to do with the way that I observed her? Something to do with beauty, with the effect her body had on me, to do even with the words themselves? Beautiful, for one. Think of the way I saw her in the bathroom that sad afternoon, the light on her breasts, the slope of her back, her thighs, her calves, her narrow ankles, all the rest I've described to you. The power she had, not she, but her body. You see in those descriptions that there are no scars, no blemishes, all that body and so little mind. But that's not true either. More than anything, she exists in me as a force, a heat deep in my spine, a turning in my chest. It is not her physical shape that stirs me most or first. And it never was, not even from the start. It is everything else: will, fire, fury, lust, intelligence, vision, heart, humor, conviction. I am doomed to this litany, to confusion, to cliches, to dead words. And yet, and still, the way she appears here to me now so clearly, I see no imperfection. And is that not a kind of tyranny? Haven't I imprisoned her, us? She becomes material so easily, whole and in parts, her skin, her eyes, her shoulders, her mouth. I do not mean to do it, but there she is, assembling, disassembling. Here I close my eyes. The falling line of her throat, her feet, which she did not like for their size and flatness. Too big, she said, so ugly. But no, there was nothing ugly. And I do remember scars. One thin curve soaring from her hip bone, left. A lopsided diamond at her ankle, left. The start of a spiral on the meat of her shoulder, right. Coming home from somewhere in winter, her eyes red from the cold, nose running, hair a tangle, lips dry and flaking. Or the relentless pimples which appeared on her chin late into her 30s, the lines at her eyes and across her forehead, the flecks of gray in her hair. It was all the same. Her beauty deepened. I cannot change this, and I cannot avoid the word. For so long I have tried to make her ugly in body and mind, but there is nothing to be done. Through all the years we are expected to stop looking at one another, I looked. When abruptly we were no longer young, through the panic of age and accelerating time and deteriorating bodies, through the shock of, the rebellion against, and at last the resignation to those things, I watched her. I could not stop. And I wonder if there was an error there, a failing somehow. I wonder if through all that watching I was doing her harm. If to see her always bathed in these golden lights was itself an act of violence. Was it the violence of worship? Have I, all these years, made her something impossible, inhuman? But then I remember my frustration, how often I hated her, how often we fought, her stubbornness, her selfishness, her disappearances, physical and otherwise, her cruelty and blindness. I have not forgotten how anger flowed between us for so many years. That's all there too. And because it is, I believe I have loved her in spite of those things. I believe I have loved her fairly. So I think I'll stop there.
Want to take some questions?
Sure. If there are any questions to take, I'll be happy to take them.
Folks, let me get to you with a mic so they can hear you online.
First of all, I love the book.
Thank you.
and also the second one you wrote, which I read as well. But at one point in the book, you actually kind of break down, I guess in the theater they call it the fourth wall,
Yeah.
and start talking to the reader. And I don't want to be a spoiler in terms of where the plot goes, but you're asking the reader about, you probably want this to happen, you probably want that to happen, in terms of what's going to happen to all the characters that you've introduced and all the different plot lines, and this is probably what you want to happen. And I'm wondering, at the time you're writing that, did you know what was going to happen? In other words, the ending, was it organic? Is it something you planned from the start as to how the novel was going to end?
That's a great question, and I honestly, I can't answer it. I don't know. I don't know. I knew vaguely where the book was going, but I really had no clear sense of the way it would end. I mean, I knew the crimes that would be committed, but I didn't know what would become of these two until very, very, very long into the process. So okay, good. I mean, you know, he is addressing a reader, but I sort of see it more as him addressing really all of those people who are lost to him, and also really himself. I mean, he's so isolated and so alone that he's looking for some kind of company, in the very sort of simplest way to say it. And that was always the idea, is that he was really telling the story as a way to combat loneliness, and also as a way to, you know, using story as a way to make sense of a world that he's really having a hard time making sense of. Which is sort of what I see, you know, writing and reading is for. Any other questions?
I read your first, I don't know, I guess it was your first about school life. This is a very different subject,
Yeah.
and I always wonder where inspiration comes from, or does it come spontaneously to you, or something that you witness?
Originally, this was to be a story about the relationship between a young boy and a prison guard in a town in Washington State where I went to college, called Walla Walla, Washington, where there's a good liberal arts college, but there's also a maximum security prison there. And I wanted to write about sort of the class tension and sort of disparate experience in the same town. And so I set out to write that book. And it is not at all the book that I ended up with. So I don't know if we call that inspiration, or if we call it, a sort of inciting incident in the life of a writer, or what. It's such a difficult question to answer, and my family life, I suppose, in some way enters into this book, and the people I was surrounded by while I was writing this book enter into it, and their preoccupations, certainly. And this was something that I wanted. I wanted to write a kind of messy book, a book where I would not worry too much about the sound of the sentences at first, and just sort of put everything in, where I would act as a kind of, I wouldn't be quite so, I wouldn't filter quite as much, and then I would deal with that later. So I know that's a sort of long, winding answer to that question. Yeah, I mean, I'm very hesitant to say, I had this idea, and this is the book, and this is why, because it denies the most wonderful part of writing fiction for me, or creating art as I understand it, which is that you really don't know, and that it's a kind of, it's a wonderful, mysterious, strange process. And I mean, that's a bit of a cliche, but it really is true. And I don't write with an outline. I don't have a story mapped out ahead of time. I have characters that I like a lot, and I follow those characters. So which is to say, I'll probably never be a very wealthy mystery writer. A formula seems to be difficult for me to work into my work. So, yes, sir.
What kind of research did you do?
Well, I have to say that I know something about it on a personal level. And I know a lot of writers, and I know a lot of artists. And to know a lot of artists and writers is to necessarily know a lot of, what's the best way to say this, unwell emotionally, people who are not exactly, well, people who suffer from mental illness. I mean, I am surrounded by, and have been for a long time, by people who are in one way or another mentally ill. And that sounds, it's a difficult question to answer without revealing too much, I suppose. But I also did read quite a bit about, memoirs of people who suffer from bipolar disorder that I'm not familiar with, or degrees. But I'm also a little bit wary of doing too much research, because in doing too much research, I find that those stories are absorbed into your own book, and I didn't want that to happen here. So that's also a sort of long, winding answer. So I guess the cleanest answer is sort of a combination of reading, talking to people I know, and my own sort of experience living in the world. Other questions? All right. Thank you all for coming. And yeah, sorry.
May I ask you a question which is not about your work?
Sure.
But we heard a few lines from a novel by Jeanette Winterson, and all I want to know from you is, have you read anything by Jeanette Winterson?
I have.
You have. Do you appreciate her? You can say
I do. It's been a while. This is exactly what I was warned about, right? Is that my father's favorite teacher, most influential teacher, would ask me a question about what I have read or not read.
I was not about
I'm just
to
kidding.
ask you to tell me anything about her. I just meant
Yes,
from what you remember. Do you think
Yes.
she was a good
Oh, absolutely, yes.
That's all I'm
Yes.
trying to know.
Yes. But I have not read the novel that was mentioned earlier.
I haven't read anything recently.
Yeah.
That's all I'm
I've read quite a bit of her criticism. Yes.
Since you don't seem to have a plot, you seem like you write something, and then
Well, I like to think there is a plot in the end. After, in the final product, there's a
when
plot.
you write it, you rewrite a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you sometimes think that you wrote something out of it that you should have left in?
Definitely. Yeah, this is the problem, is that a big, fat, messy draft means that you have to rewrite and edit and edit. And so when you're I don't know, I'm sure that there are pieces as I save all of my drafts, and I'm sure I could go through draft one or old notebooks and find bits and pieces that might have some value still. But I hope that this is the novel that I wanted to write, and that it contains what was essential to produce it. But I don't know.
So you go back and change things?
Yes. Yeah, I will. The first draft was 600 pages. I printed it out, and then I read it with a big red pen in my hand, and I cut the stuff I hated and kept the stuff I thought that was either good or could be good, and I did that. I think I have 16, 17 drafts of this book on a computer.
And then you give other people to read?
Eventually, yes, when I'm confident that it's not an utter embarrassment, then I read a lot aloud to friends, writer friends, and then I'll ask people to read it, and people who I think will be honest but kind, but not so kind as to be detrimental. It's a question of who you trust, and the kind of reader you want at a given time, but in the end, you just hope that someone will want to. I don't think I can do any more with this book, and I got to a point where there was just no, I couldn't, every smart person I knew who was willing to read the book or read it again had done so. And so I finally sent it to my agent. And that's it. I mean, it does, there's nothing, at least in my experience, there's nothing simple about it. It's a sort of some combination of instinct and hope. Oh, well, that's nice to hear. Thank you. Thanks. Like I said, I write to read aloud, so maybe that has something to do with it. That's been very helpful to me, to read to people and let so I can hear the sound of it. Yeah.
You are absolutely right. Not that you need my endorsement, but his writing is, in instances, poetic prose, which is a form of poetry, and it clearly is to the advantage of the book. That's part of what I had said to him earlier about infinite detail, which he touches upon. I think you enjoy, again, I don't know, but that descriptive part of when you're talking about nature or the wind or
Sure.
the pathway or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I do. It's true.
How long did it take you to write the book?
About 3 years, 3.5 years. That seems to.
You always write it?
Well, I don't. I don't know when. I don't know when. I feel as if I'm writing now, and I have a notebook. I've been traveling since early September for this book, and I've been writing on planes and sitting around, but just notes. But that counts to me. Constantly thinking about this new book, and I'm reading a lot and thinking about this new book as I'm reading. So that to me counts as writing. Actually sitting down at the computer, maybe 2 years, 2.5 years. I think so. I think so. If not in politics, it does in art. So I think we're finished, yeah? Unless there are other questions. All right. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Alex. Folks, just a reminder to my internet audience watching, wherever you are in the world, give us a call. There's a number on your screen, and you can call us at the number there, and we'll get a book signed for you, as I said earlier. We'll ship it to you. For those of you here, the books are for sale behind the counter. Alexander will be sitting right over here to get his, you can get his signature over here. And that was a wonderful reading and a wonderful performance. Do you think we can get another round of applause for my author, please? Thank you all so much for coming.